This is Recipe for Sleep, a podcast where we dust off very old cookbooks and let them lull us into dreamland. I'm Erin Brindley, a chef and storyteller. I've got a library full of old recipes from the late 1800s and early 1900s, and in this podcast, I read them to you to give your mind an easy, sweet place to spend some time. If you fall asleep mid-recipe, all the better. Tonight, we're tucking back into 1906's Books and My Food with literary quotations and original recipes for every day of the year. I chose this book to get us through all the holiday season, although I think it would take us through February to get through the whole thing, because each recipe is coupled with a literary quote from an English author. It's not always Dickens, but sometimes it is, and it's just right for cold days and long nights. We last left off in April, but I'm going to skip ahead to November. The recipes are cozier, and because we're releasing this episode the week of the Winter Solstice, it feels right to hear about all the rich dishes and spiced wines. When you're ready, turn the lights out, put away anything you were doing, and snuggle deep into your sweet covers. Imagine the kitchen of your mind. There are 2 cupboards there. There's yesterday's cupboard, for all the things that have already happened, that your mind wants to chew on. And tomorrow's cupboard, for all of the things that you're going to do, or what's going to happen later. It's time to put everything away in those cupboards. Imagine closing each one. You made it to this cozy, quiet time of day, where there's nothing to do but listen to me read you old cookbooks until you drift off to sleep. Now, let's open the worn cover of Books and My Food and flip through the butter-stained pages so we can begin in the middle. November 1st. A smoking soup here came in, borne by the smiling host. "Behold, a potage of my fashion," says my landlord, laying down the dish. Thackeray, The Virginians. For pepper pot soup, to 3 quarts of water, put vegetables according to the season. In summer, peas, lettuce, and spinach. In winter, carrots, turnips, celery, and onions at any time of year. Cut them small and stew with 2 pounds of the neck of mutton or with a fowl till quite tender. First boiling, skim. Half an hour before serving, add the meat of a lobster. Season with salt and cayenne pepper. A small quantity of rice should be put in with the meat. This is an old-fashioned English recipe and is very good, very rich, and very warming on a bitter night in winter when cold blows the blast. November 2nd. Nobody ever dreamed such a soup as was put upon the table directly afterwards, or such fish, or such side dishes, or such a top and bottom, or such a course of birds and sweets. Charles Dickens, Martin Chuzzlewit. There are people to whom the delights of codfish tongues are unknown, but they are a great delicacy. Wash a dozen or more, put them over a fire in cold water, a tablespoonful of salt, a sliced onion, and half a lemon sliced. Let them come to a boil quickly, and when they have boiled 1 minute, set them away to cool in an earthenware dish in the water they were boiled in. When cool, dip them in milk, roll them in sifted breadcrumbs, then fry them in hot butter till they are delicate brown, turning them as they brown. Serve them with tomato or other piquant sauce. November 3rd. Soon he and Gerard and Margaret were supping royally on broiled venison. Charles Reade, The Cloister and the Hearth. A venison steak is cut from the leg or from the shoulder blade, the latter having a superior flavor. Broil rare and serve with a sauce made by melting a tablespoonful of currant jelly in a glassful of hot Madeira to which a teaspoonful of lemon juice has been added. Pepper and salt the steak lightly before pouring the sauce over it. November 4th. Fetch up the venison and the sweet sauce. You may leave the water gruel till I ring for it. Charles Reade, it is never too late to mend. Currant jelly sauce is an old favorite to serve with venison or mutton. To 1 tablespoonful of butter, add 1 of flour, browned in the oven. Cook together till they bubble and begin to darken, when a cupful of consommé or brown soup stock should be poured in slowly. To darken still more, add a few drops of caramel. Just before taking from the fire, stir in half a cup of currant jelly. November 5th. Hares, pheasants, partridges, snipes, barn-door chickens, those tame villatic fowl, capons, plovers, brawn, barrels of oysters, I dispense as freely as I receive them. Charles Lamb, Essays of Elia. Cut off the breast from half a dozen snipe. Put in a frying pan a tablespoonful of butter. Rub into it a teaspoonful of flour till brown and smooth. Add 2 cloves, a peppercorn, a sprig of parsley, a gill of water, a gill of claret, a tablespoonful of chopped mushrooms. Cover the pan and simmer for 2 minutes after adding the breasts of the snipe. Spread thin slices of toast with currant jelly, and on these serve the snipe, pouring gravy all over them. November 6th. Those unctuous morsels of deer's flesh were not made to be received with dispassionate services. I hate a man who swallows it, affecting not to know what he is eating. Charles Lamb. A venison ragout may be made as unctuous as one pleases from pieces unsuitable to use as steaks. Cut the meat into large squares. Put it into a frying pan with hot butter and toss it about for not more than 5 minutes. Add a tablespoonful of flour, then a pint of brown stock, half a cupful of mushrooms, a tablespoonful of currant jelly, and a little salt. Pepper and onion juice, which are usually advised, are best omitted. Mushrooms combine particularly well with the venison flavor. November 7th. But Messenger was carving a loin of veal. Jem Messenger sat opposite him, eating bacon and beans on a very large scale. Charles Reade, Clouds and Sunshine. As an agreeable variation from pork and beans, boil and rub through a colander a quart of white beans. Heat in a saucepan a large teaspoonful of butter with paprika, salt, a teaspoonful of sugar, a tablespoonful of chopped parsley, and a leaf or 2 of mint, chopped fine. Stir in the beans and toss, and stir constantly till very hot. Place on a hot platter with bits of bacon around the edge. November 8th. Soup à la bonne femme with a pedrouille en choux to follow, and pancakes and fromage de brie, and to drink a bottle of Roman Conti. Georges de Mauriac. Peter Ibbotson. To make the French pancakes referred to above, beat whites and yolks of 3 eggs separately, and to the yolks add a cup of milk, half a teaspoonful of salt, and a teaspoonful of sugar. Pour 1/3 of this mixture on half a cupful of flour and beat till smooth. Add the remainder of the milk, beat well, and put in a dessertspoonful of salad oil and the whites of the eggs. Heat and butter a small frying pan. Cover with a thin layer of batter. Brown and turn. When a light brown on each side, spread quickly with butter and a tart jelly. Roll and sprinkle with powdered sugar, in which has been stirred a little ground cinnamon. November 9th. Don't get any dainties for me, my dear. Bread and cheese is the chief of my diet. Mrs. Gaskell, Wives and Daughters. Bread and cheese combined make an excellent luncheon or supper dish known as baked Welsh rabbit. Have ready a cupful and a half of breadcrumbs free from crusts, and a cupful of grated rich cheese, about a cupful of milk, and 2 tablespoonfuls of butter. Put in a baking dish a layer of breadcrumbs. Strew with bits of butter, a little salt, a dust of paprika, then a layer of cheese. Repeat till the dish is full, then pour on enough milk to moisten well but not soak the breadcrumbs. Sprinkle dry crumbs on top with plenty of bits of butter. Bake in a quick oven. November 10th. Look at me. I make my own bread, and there's no difference between one batch and another from year's end to year's end. But if I'd got any other woman besides Vixen in this house, I must pray to the Lord every baking to give me patience if the bread turned out heavy. George Eliot, Adam Bede. A careful rule for homemade bread is this. Late in the evening, place in bread pan 3 quarts of sifted flour and a teaspoonful of salt. Soak half a cake of compressed yeast in a cupful of lukewarm water. Add 2 quarts of water of the same temperature and mix well into the flour. Cover the pan with a clean cloth and the breadboard and set to rise where the temperature is 70 or 75 degrees. In the morning, add flour enough to make a fairly stiff dough. Knead half an hour, then set it by the fire for 5 hours. Separate into loaves. Knead them 10 minutes and set to rise again. When light, bake in a quick oven. November 11th. Take a déjeuner of muscadel and eggs. Ben Jonson, The New Inn. To make egg wine, as it is called in the annals of Old English cookery, beat an egg, mix it with a tablespoonful of cold water. Set on the fire a glass of muscadel, half a glass of water, a little sugar, and a grating of nutmeg. When it boils, pour over the beaten egg slowly, stirring well. Return it to the fire where it will not be too hot, stirring it one way for not more than a minute. If it boils or the egg is not fresh, it will curdle. November 12th. Oats for their feasts the Scottish shepherds give. Gay. Make a fine oatmeal caudle. Take 3 quarts of boiling water. Add a pint of cold water into which has been stirred until smooth 6 tablespoonfuls of oatmeal. Cook until it thickens, then season with a little salt, a dash of pepper, and sweeten to taste. Add half a pint of ale and a small wineglass of gin. The old rule for this caudle tells us that it will be of incalculable service to the sick and weak. November 13th. I myself, and not another, would eat her nice cake. Charles Lamb, Essays of Elia. A pleasant and deceptive reminiscence of New England loaf cake is furnished by No Egg Cake, which is a useful recipe for times and seasons when eggs are scarce and high. Cream 1/2 a cupful of butter with 1 cupful of sugar. Stir in a cupful of milk and 1 of raisins, stoned and dredged with flour. Flavor with a teaspoonful of vanilla, a little nutmeg, and a pinch of cinnamon. At the last, stir lightly in 2½ cupfuls of sifted flour, in which is well mixed 3 teaspoonfuls of baking powder. Other flavoring may be substituted or added, but a mixture of flavors is best. November 14th. What will this sister of mine do with rice? Shakespeare. Winter's Tale. Rice served as a vegetable is improved by browning in melted butter after it has been carefully cooked without stirring in a double boiler. If the rice is the excellent South Carolina variety, it will come out when perfectly tender with every grain unbroken. Stir into it as lightly as possible a tablespoonful of chives before browning. Heap on a platter and serve very hot. November 15th. I have ordered 12 sorts of fish at the Peacock, my lord. Charles Reade, Peg Woofington. In a collection of 12 fish, the old-fashioned smoked sturgeon ought to have a place. Cut it in steaks about an inch thick and broil it over charcoals. Rub butter and lemon juice over it in liberal quantities and eat with hot muffins, fried potatoes, and watercress for a Sunday morning breakfast. November 16th. I'm blessed if he didn't bring Master a plate of cabbage. Thackeray, The Yellow Plush Papers. The delicate variety of cabbage, known as Brussels sprouts, is much improved by careful cooking. The sprouts should be thoroughly washed and then thrown into an abundance of boiling water and boiled for 8 minutes, then drained and thrown into cold water. Drain again and cook for 15 or 20 minutes in a large cupful of boiling veal stock. Before serving, add salt and pepper and 2 tablespoonfuls of cream and pour the stock into the dish with the sprouts. November 17th. There was a hot shoulder of mutton and onion sauce. Thackeray. To prepare onion sauce, peel the onions and boil until tender. Drain, chop fine, and add them to a rich white sauce. Boil up once and serve with the meat. A turnip boiled with the onions, but not served, improves the flavor. November 18th. If my master has given me 10 talents, my duty is to trade with them and make them 10 talents more. Not in the dust of household drawers shall the coin be interred. Least of all will I hide it in a tureen of cold potatoes, to be ranged with bread, butter pastry, and ham on the shelves of the larder. Charlotte Bronte, Shirley. A use for cold potatoes, of which no one need speak slightingly, is to make them into a salad, alone or in combination. Slice rather thin 6 or 8 good-sized potatoes. Add a teaspoonful of chopped parsley, a tablespoonful of capers or chopped cucumber pickle, and marinade with 3 tablespoonfuls of vinegar and 6 of oil, a teaspoonful of salt, 1/4 of a teaspoonful of pepper, and 1 teaspoonful of onion juice. Set in a cold place for an hour or more. A little celery, cut into small bits, may be added, and the onion omitted. Serve on lettuce leaves. November 19th. For the more genteel, snipe, woodcock, partridge, pheasant, quail will serve. W. Cartwright, The Ordinary. Rub the snipe inside and out with a wet cloth instead of washing. After scalding a minute in hot water, skin the lower legs, cut off the feet, skin the head, and remove the eyes. Wrap each one in a thin slice of bacon or salt pork and bake in a hot oven. Baste well with butter. Chop livers and hearts very fine. Season with salt, pepper, onion juice, and butter. Heat very hot. Spread onto small slices of toast and place for a moment in the oven. Remove from the oven, pour over the toast the juice from the baking pan. Put the birds on the toast and serve hot. November 20th. Right glad he was to find a cauldron full of gelatinized beef soup. Charles Reade, It is never too late to mend. For beef soup, the top of the sirloin is excellent. It is better than the round, as it has a richer flavor. Whatever beef is selected, remove all the fat and cut into small pieces. Barely cover it with water. Let it boil up rapidly, and then add cold water for the proportion of 1 quart of water to each pound of meat. Flavor it with a mince of carrots, turnips, and other roots and herbs. When it has cooked 1 hour, add a scant cupful of well-washed rice, a cupful of stewed tomatoes, a few mushrooms, or almost any other vegetable may be added to beef broth to its improvement. If this broth has been properly cooked, which means being allowed to simmer for 3 hours, the meat will literally melt in the mouth, the fiber being thoroughly weakened and the nutriment well distributed. November 21st. It was a glorious supper. There were kippered salmon and finnan haddock and a lamb's head and haggis. Charles Dickens, Pickwick Papers. Finnan haddock, or haddie as it is commonly called, makes an excellent plain dish for a Sunday night tea as a relish or for breakfast served with eggs. Wash the fish thoroughly, leave in cold water half an hour, then bring to the boil in order to soften them slightly. Wipe dry, rub over with butter and lemon juice, and broil 15 minutes. Serve on a hot covered dish. November 22nd. There were 5 mince pies. Mr. Pendennis, you saw yourself there were 5 went away from table yesterday. Thackeray, The Newcomes. The following recipe for mincemeat has been used in one family for nearly 50 years, and 3 generations have sung its praises. The materials required are 3 large cupfuls of finely chopped beef, boiled very tender, 6 cupfuls of chopped apples, 1 cupful of molasses, 1 tablespoonful of cinnamon, 1 of allspice, and a half a tablespoonful of cloves, 1 nutmeg grated, 2 tablespoonfuls of salt, chopped peel of 2 lemons, 2 cupfuls of sugar, 1 quart of hard cider, juice and pulp of an orange and a lemon, half a pound of currants, half a pound of raisins, a 1/4 pound of sliced citron, a cupful of brandy. Mix all the ingredients together and boil them half an hour. Turn the mixture into a stone crock. Cover with a white cloth tied down to exclude dust, and a tin cover or a plate on top of this. In a cool place, it will keep for months. The pie crust will be more wholesome, though less flaky, if made with butter in place of lard. November 23rd. 'Tis the sour sauce to the sweet meat. Dryden, to Etheridge. The best tart sauce to eat with meat, particularly poultry, is made of cranberries. In 1 pint of cold water, put 1 quart of the berries. Cook slowly till broken to pieces, when they should be removed from the fire and put through a colander. Add the sugar, return to the fire, and cook just long enough to have the sugar dissolve. November 24th. Nothing but barons of beef and turkeys would go down with him, to the great greasing and detriment of his new sackcloth bib and tucker. Charles Lamb. To prepare a stuffed boiled turkey, mix with 1 quart of breadcrumbs half a head of celery chopped fine, 2 scant tablespoonfuls of salt, half a teaspoonful of pepper, 2 heaping tablespoonfuls of butter, and 2 eggs. Stuff the turkey with this, sew up and truss. Wring a square cloth out of cold water and dredge it thickly with flour. Pin the turkey in this and plunge into boiling water. Let it boil rapidly for 15 minutes, then set back to where it will simmer. Allow 3 hours for a turkey weighing 9 pounds. Serve with celery sauce. November 25th. One would not, like Lear, give everything. I make my stand upon pig. Charles Lamb. Although fewer people than formerly make their stand upon pig, one form or another of pork is frequently used to make a variety of plain bills of fare. An old-fashioned dish that can still count its appreciative partakers is fried pork and apples, a very rich and palatable combination. Fry 5 or 6 slices of pork until about half done. Then lift them out of the fat and put them in another frying pan to finish cooking. To the fat in the first pan, add thick slices of apples, cored but not peeled, and stew until tender. A more delicate dish is made by substituting butter for pork fat and serving the apples with thin slices of broiled bacon. November 26th. In after-dinner talk, across the walnuts and the wine. Tennyson, the Miller's Daughter. Boil together 1 cupful each of granulated sugar and boiling water for a half an hour. Then dip the point of a skewer into the syrup and then into cold water. If the thread formed is brittle, the syrup is ready. Do not stir and boil slowly and steadily. When done, set the kettle in boiling water. Take shelled walnuts on the point of a skewer and dip into the syrup and lay on a lightly buttered dish to harden. November 27th. We'll try whether Matthew or I shall get the largest cut of the apple pie today. Charlotte Bronte. Shirley. The apple pie of our grandmothers was worth fighting over. These skillful ladies made a very short pie crust of lard, cut into sifted flour, and wet into a paste with ice water. This they rolled out into a long, narrow strip, dabbed with butter, rolled together, and standing on edge, rolled it out flat again. For the upper crust, this process was 3 times repeated. They filled the pie heaping full with tart, juicy apples, sliced and buttered the edges of the under crust before laying on the upper crust. When the pie was baked, this upper crust was deftly lifted off, and a lump of butter, some sugar, and nutmeg were stirred into the apple filling. The crust was replaced, and the pie eaten. November 28th. You might have made the porridge worse, she said to Dinah. I can eat it without it turning my stomach. It might have been a trifle thicker, and no harm. And I allays putting a sprig of mint in mysen. But how's ye to know that? George Eliot. Adam Beattie. A really good porridge is not to be despised either in sickness or in health. If it is for an invalid, the following rule is a good one. Wash a tablespoonful of rice and boil in a pint of water for 15 minutes. Add a pint of milk, in which a tablespoonful of flour has been stirred smooth. Mix the flour with 2 or 3 spoonfuls of the milk before adding it to the remainder. Cook for an hour in a double boiler. Season with a teaspoonful of salt. The same rule, with double amount of milk, dash of red pepper, and a little onion juice, makes excellent rice soup. November 29th. At the sides was spinach and pudding made hot. Goldsmith. Wash with great care a peck of spinach. Put into a saucepan with half a cup of cold water and cook for 20 minutes to a half an hour after it begins to boil. Salt the spinach, then turn into a colander to drain. Mince fine. Heat a large tablespoonful of butter, stir into it a scant tablespoonful of flour, and when hot, add salt and pepper and stir into the spinach. When it comes to a boil, Add 4 tablespoonfuls of cream and stir constantly for a few minutes. Garnish with hard-boiled egg and serve on slices of toast. This is a pleasant variation from the usual way of serving. November 30th. Our honest neighbor's goose and dumplings were fine. Goldsmith, Vicar of Wakefield. This undoubtedly was stewed green goose, which is almost as delicate as spring chicken. A good recipe for a green goose stew requires 2 of the young birds, which should be washed and cleaned and highly seasoned with salt, pepper, mace, and allspice. Put one bird inside the other and press them close together as possible, drawing the legs inward. Put them in a baking pan with a cupful of water. Spread a tablespoonful of butter over them and bake in a slow oven. The dumplings are raised with yeast instead of baking powder, the dough being made as for bread, but with milk in place of water. Let it rise an hour before the fire, then make into balls the size of a small apple, and drop them into boiling water. 20 minutes of fast boiling will cook them. On serving, tear each dumpling slightly apart with 2 forks to let the steam escape and prevent their becoming heavy. December 1st. Dame Best has had a soup and pudding from the hall every day, and once she went so far as to say it was not altogether a bad pudding. Charles Reade, Peg Woffington. A soup that is judged on its merits as to nourishing and appetizing qualities, not on its appearance, is a plain vegetable soup, whose base is a good stock made the day before it is needed of odds and ends of cooked and uncooked meats, allowing a quart of water to each pound of meat and bone. Cook slowly till the liquid is reduced about 1/2. Set away to cool, and when quite cold, remove the fat, which will have risen to the top in a cake. 2 hours before the soup is needed, put the stock on where it will heat slowly and add to it a carrot chopped fine, 2 or 3 onions, tomatoes, celery stalks or roots, green peas, or any convenient vegetable with 1/2 cup of well-washed rice. Season rather highly and do not strain out the vegetables. December 2nd. Capital, said he. His mouth was full of it, his face quite red with the delightful exercise of gobbling. Mother, it's as good as my own curries in India. Thackeray, Vanity Fair. Put into a pan an ounce of butter. Stir over the fire until it melts. Add a teaspoonful of minced white onion. When brown, add a heaping teaspoonful of curry powder, the meat from the tails of 2 boiled lobsters, the juice of 1/2 lemon, a teaspoonful of browned flour, and a pint of clear soup stock or hot water. Simmer until it thickens. Add a saltspoonful of salt and serve. This is a mild curry. December 3rd. A pasty costly made, where quail and pigeon, lark and leveret lay, like fossils of the rock with golden yolks, embedied and enjellied. Tennyson, Audley Court. Draw the quails, and wipe them outside and in with a damp cloth. Put a raw oyster or 2 in each quail. Fasten slices of bacon cut very thin over the breast. Put them in a pan with a little hot water. Cover closely and cook 20 to 25 minutes, according to the size, in a rather hot oven. Baste occasionally, and at the last, uncover for 5 minutes. Season with butter, salt, and pepper, and serve on squares of buttered toast, moistened with the gravy from the pan. December 4th. I'll make her a pudding, and a pudding she'll like, too. Many a one has been comforted in their sorrow by seeing a good dish come upon the table. Mrs. Gaskell, Cranford. A reasonably comforting pudding for a winter day, which requires, however, an appetite somewhat sturdier than is expected of the sorrowful, is made by pouring over half a pint of fine breadcrumbs, half a pint of scalding milk, adding, after an hour, 4 beaten eggs, a teaspoonful of flour, an ounce of butter, 2 ounces of sugar, half a pound of currants, an ounce of powdered almonds, half an ounce of shredded citron, the same of lemon peel, and a quarter of a teacupful of French brandy. Mix and tie tightly in a floured cloth and place in a buttered pudding dish that should be a size precisely to fit it. Boil an hour. Serve with hard sauce. December 5th. Clouded cream so seldom comes to London quite fresh. Charles Reade, Peg Woofington. Every housekeeper may have Devonshire cream on her own table if she will take the trouble to prepare it. Rich new milk is put in a very shallow vessel, which is set on the range where the milk will be warmed, but on no account must it boil or even scald. The cream will rise to the surface in a short time, and the pan is then taken off and placed in the icebox. When thoroughly chilled, the cream may be skimmed, and it will be found very thick. Put it in a jar and use for cereals, berries, everything that ordinary cream is used for, its merit being that it is the richest of cream, and also that it will keep for several days. December 6th. He managed a couple of plates of strawberries and cream and 24 little rout cakes that were lying neglected in a plate near him. Thackeray, Vanity Fair. Make the little rout cakes, famous in English literature since the 18th century. Mix 2 pounds of flour, 1 of butter, 1 of sugar, 1 of clean, dry currants. Whip into a stiff paste with 2 eggs, a tablespoonful each of orange flower water, rose water, sweet wine, and brandy. Drop on floured tin plates and bake in a quick oven. December 7th. She wrenched from her brow a diamond and eyed it with contempt, took from her pocket a sausage and contemplated it with respect and affection. Charles Reade, Peg Woofington. If one likes the flavor of sausage, but finds it rather too porky as it comes from market, an easy expedient is to buy the best sausage meat obtainable, not the links, and add it to as much more lean chopped beef. Make into cakes and cook thoroughly in a very hot pan, turning often, not to burn. December 8th. Maria is ready for you now in the kitchen, Mrs. Morel. The onions have come. Bernard Shaw, Candida. The susceptibilities of the poet might endure even the small red onion of the Morel household, if they were boiled tender and served with a sauce of unthickened cream, seasoned with a dash of red pepper and a little chopped parsley. December 9th. The shepherdess who lives on salad. Gay. If the shepherdess was as buxom and rosy as most of the old poets make her, she probably took care to have her salads substantial ones. This, a favorite with a physician renowned for his gastronomic wisdom, would answer her purpose. To a pint of cold sliced potatoes, add a tart apple sliced, a dozen slices of cold boiled beets, a few flakes of smoked herring, a small pickle sliced, a teaspoonful of capers, and a little chopped parsley. Mix with an ample quantity of mayonnaise dressing. December 10th. With corn to make your needy bread, and give them life whom hunger starved half dead. Shakespeare, Pericles. A very nourishing cornbread is made with a cupful of cornmeal, 2 cupfuls of boiled rice, 1 cupful of milk, 1 egg, half a teaspoonful of salt, a tablespoonful of sugar, butter the size of an egg, and a teaspoonful of baking powder. Mix cornmeal, sugar, salt, and baking powder together. Add the other ingredients after melting the butter and putting the rice through the colander. Bake half an hour. December 11th. And a large chestnut, the delicious meat which Jove himself, were he a mouse, would eat. Cowley. Poems. Roasted chestnuts, of the French or Italian variety, are most satisfactory. Before cooking, cut a slit in each nut. Put them in a saucepan with just enough boiling water to cover them. Boil 30 minutes. Drain and put in a hot oven for 10 minutes, and serve in a folded napkin. Pass salt with them. Care must be taken not to let the chestnuts cool after boiling before putting in the oven. December 12th. A Welsh rabbit, à la cave au cidre. Thackeray. A Legend of the Rhine. Put in the blazer of a chafing dish half a teacupful of Bass's ale and bring it to the boiling point. Add 2 pounds rich American cheese, grated, stirring constantly. Season with 6 teaspoonfuls of dry mustard and a shake or 2 of cayenne pepper. When it is smooth and creamy, pour over hot toast. An egg beaten up and stirred in after the cheese has melted will prevent curdling. But if the cheese is of the right sort, this will not be necessary, nor need the usual precaution of cooking the rabbit over hot water be taken. December 13th. Tea was made downstairs, biscuits and baked apples. Jane Austen, Emma. Core and peel tart apples and bake in a porcelain-lined dish with half a cupful of water until they are transparent. Place them in a glass dish. Fill the space left by the cores with whipped cream. Stick the apples closely with blanched almonds and surround them with sugar and whipped cream flavored with maraschino. December 14th. Tea and coffee were there. A jug of water for Hewson. Arthur Hugh Clough, the Boffy of Tabernavollic. A café frappé, very simple to prepare and satisfactory to partake of, is made by adding to 1 quart of black coffee 1 pint of whipped and sweetened cream. Turn into a freezer, pack in salt and ice, and allow it to stand for an hour and a half. Serve in tall glasses. December 15th. On one side of the table, 2 green sauce terrines were sitting next to each other in a green dish, and on the other was a curried rabbit in a brown suit, turned up with lemon. Charles Dickens, Sketches by Boz. Skin the rabbit, clean it, and divide in convenient pieces. Fry a slice of onion in butter. When brown, put into the pan the pieces of rabbit, salted, peppered, and dredged with flour. Cook quickly for a few minutes, turning over often so that all parts may be seared. Cover with cold water, add parsley, sage, or any other herb whose flavor is liked. Pepper and salt. When cooked tender, take from the pan and keep hot while a gravy is made by adding butter, flour, catsup, and a dessert spoonful of curry powder. Mushrooms are an improvement also. At the end, add a glass of claret. Pour over the meat. December 16th. The beans and bacon set before him. Pope. To prepare Isle of Shoals baked beans, soak overnight 1 quart of white beans in barely enough water to cover them. Boil in same water. Add to the water 2 tablespoonfuls of molasses. Put the beans in a deep earthen pot. Place in the center a generous piece of salt pork, with the rind cut in strips above the beans. Bake in a moderate heat for 24 hours. 2 hours before serving, give them a brisk heat. Serve hot in the pot. At the last baking, add a little water from time to time if they seem too dry. December 17th. A little piece of salmon cut out of the fish's center. Charles Reade. It is never too late to mend. Wash and dry a slice of smoked salmon and broil slowly for 12 or 15 minutes. Place it on a hot dish and spread over it a sauce made of 1/4 cup of butter, into which has been stirred half a teaspoonful of salt, a little paprika, and 1 tablespoonful each of chopped parsley and lemon juice. December 18th. They call for date and quinces in the pastry. Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet. To make a date pudding, soak in a cupful of milk, a cupful of breadcrumbs free from crusts. Beat in 2 eggs, 2 tablespoonfuls of suet, chopped very fine, half a cupful of sugar, a saltspoonful each of salt and cinnamon, and a little nutmeg. Chop a cupful of dates and figs, dredge with a heaping tablespoonful of sifted flour, and stir into the pudding. Beat hard for 2 or 3 minutes, pour into a well-buttered mold, and steam for 3 hours. Eat with a hard sauce, well flavored with nutmeg and brandy or sherry. December 19th. Venison, the red and the roe, with mutton, and grouse succeeding. Arthur Hugh Clough, The Bothy of Tavernavolic. Clean, wipe, and lard the legs and breast of grouse. Rub well with butter, dredge with flour, season with salt, and cook in a quick oven for 30 minutes if liked well done. 20 or less will be enough if liked rare. December 20th. I had rather have a handful or 2 of dried peas. Shakespeare, Midsummer Night's Dream. The best use to put dried or split peas is to make soup of them. Soak a cupful overnight. Put on to boil in 3 pints of fresh water, adding more as it boils away so as to keep about 3 pints in the kettle. Stir often to keep from sticking to the sides of the kettle. When thoroughly soft, put through a strainer and return to the fire. Stock, milk, or cream may be added to make it the consistency preferred. Add to the strained soup, while boiling, a tablespoonful of butter, which has been melted and blended with 1 of flour. When it has all simmered 10 minutes, season with salt and pepper and serve. To many tastes, this soup is greatly improved by adding to the water a ham bone. December 21st. Mushrooms, thought I, are better than those tasteless truffles, and so ordered a dish to try. You know what a Provençal sauce is? Thackeray, Memorials of Gourmandizing. Most American cooks do not know what a Provençal sauce is. Wash, peel, stem and fry half a pound of fresh mushrooms. Remove from the pan. Put 2 or 3 raw mushrooms chopped fine, a clove of garlic, 2 chopped shallots, and 2 tablespoonfuls of olive oil in the frying pan. Stir in while cooking a teaspoonful of flour. Add half a pint of white wine and as much stock, 2 sprigs of parsley, 1 of thyme, half a bay leaf, salt and pepper. Simmer about a half an hour, strain, and pour over the fried mushrooms. If garlic is objected to, onion can be substituted, but garlic carefully used has the more delicate flavor of the two, and one that is slowly gaining favor in America. December 22nd. Certainly Savarin could not have lived in a country farm upon endives and mallows. Bulwer, Parisians. A modern confection in high favor among schoolgirls and others is marshmallow pinoche. To make it, boil together 2 cupfuls of brown and 1 of white sugar, 1 cupful of milk, and butter the size of an egg. Flavor with vanilla. Stir while cooking, which will take about 20 minutes. Try by putting in a little water, and if it balls readily, it will be cooked enough. And you must then add a dozen soft marshmallow candies and beat thoroughly. Just before pouring into buttered plates, stir in a cupful of walnuts. December 23rd. At breakfast time, when clippers yearly met, filled full of furmity, where dainty swum the streaking sugar and the spotted plum. John Clark. Furmity was of old favored in having 2 days when it was especially appropriate to serve it, Mothering Day and Christmas. And for the tray of the invalid unable to eat the traditional plum pudding, it was a not unacceptable substitute. To 2 cupfuls of milk, add 4 cupfuls of water, and bring to the boiling point. Add a level teaspoonful of salt and a half a cupful of pearl or whole wheat. Stir constantly until it boils. Then place in the upper part of a double boiler, the lower part of which is filled with boiling water, and cook for 3 hours. Serve with sugar, cinnamon, cream, and stewed prunes. December 24th. I went and got the best goose I could find. I don't think I ever saw a primer or ate a more hearty myself, and had it roasted at 3. Thackeray, dogs have their day. A goose should be roasted longer and basted oftener than other poultry. 25 minutes to the pound is none too long. For the stuffing, mix breadcrumbs and pulverized chestnuts, seasoned with salt and pepper. A green goose is one under 4 months old, and these are decidedly preferable to the older fowls. Gooseberry sauce is an appropriate accompaniment. Applesauce is also orthodox. December 25th. In half a minute, Mrs. Cratchit entered, flushed but smiling proudly with the pudding, like a speckled cannonball so hard and firm, blazing in half a quarters of ignited brandy, and bedight with Christmas holly stuck into the top. Charles Dickens, The Christmas Carol. Stone 1 pound of raisins and add them to 1/2 gill of brandy, the grated rind of an orange, and a lemon, 1 ounce each of candied lemon and orange peel, and 2 of citron, 1 pound of clean currants, 1/4 pound of almonds, blanched, and pounded to a paste, a pound of suet, chopped fine and rubbed with 4 tablespoonfuls of flour, 1 teaspoonful of salt, a nutmeg, and 1 pound of fresh breadcrumbs. Mix well and add a gill of sherry. Cover closely and stand in a cool place for a day. Just before boiling, add 8 eggs, well beaten, and enough cream to moisten, not enough to make soggy. Stir hard and pour into buttered molds, which have been dusted with flour. Press pudding well into the mold to within 2 inches of the top. Put buttered paper on top. Cover closely and steam 10 hours. It should be kept at least a month before using and steamed 2 more hours before serving. Do not open mold until ready to serve, when brandy should be poured over the pudding and lighted. Brandy sauce or rum sauce should be the accompaniment. December 26th. The poor little partridge was soon a heap of bones, a very little heap. Thackeray, Memorials of Gormandizing. Cut the meat from the breast of a partridge. Put the bone, together with the wings and legs, into a pan and cover with water. Add 1 small onion, a stalk of celery, a bit of whole mace, and a little salt and cayenne pepper, and boil until the liquor is reduced to a pint, then strain. Fry the breast meat in hot butter. After the meat is taken out of the frying pan, add to the butter 2 tablespoonfuls of flour. Rub smooth. Pour in the broth from the bones. Boil until of a creamy consistency. Pour over meat and serve. December 27th. And as for the turkey and celery sauce, you should have seen how our host dispensed it. Thackeray, Memorials of Gourmandizing. Celery sauce gives to boiled turkey a delightful flavor. To prepare it, heat it in a saucepan in a tablespoonful of butter, and as it melts slowly, add a heaping tablespoonful of flour, stirring constantly. When thoroughly blended, pour in a pint of milk and keep steadily stirring until the sauce is smooth and thick. Season with a saltspoonful of salt and a dash of pepper, and the juice of half a lemon. Stir in a cupful of chopped stewed celery. Allow it to boil up once, and serve. December 28th. A cup of hot wine with not a drop of allaying Tiber in it. Shakespeare, Coriolanus. In Roman days, they may have served their wine hot, without a drop of water. But for a century or more, the English rule for a mulled wine calls for some allaying fluid. A large cupful of water should be boiled with a piece or 2 of stick cinnamon and some grated nutmeg. Take out the cinnamon, pour in a pint of port or sherry, add sugar to your taste, heat up once again, and it is ready. December 29th. Pray, does anybody here hate cheese? I would be glad of a bit. Swift. A dish which few men will hate is made by adding to 1/4 of a camembert cheese a piece of butter the size of a large horse chestnut and a dash of paprika. Mix well with a pliable knife on a plate which has been rubbed with a clove of garlic. Remove the rind from the cheese before mixing with the butter. December 30th. Immense reduction in eggs. Only 1 shilling each. Charles Reade. It is never too late to mend. At the price of 1 shilling apiece, one may be sure eggs will be used singly, not in battalions, and the way to make the most of one would be perhaps to convert it into an eggnog. Beat the egg in a glass till very light with a tiny pinch of salt. When light, add 2 teaspoonfuls of sugar and a glass of sherry, grating a little nutmeg on top. A very good temperance of eggnog is made by adding the juice of a lemon in place of the sherry. December 31st. Christmas Day was at his elbow, plying him with a wassail bowl until he roared. Charles Lamb. The following recipe for wassail punch is that used in one of the oldest literary clubs of New York, and the punch is served there on every New Year's Eve. Put into 2 quarts of boiling water a small bag of allspice and leave it for 2 minutes. Take it out and add to the water 2 quarts of apple brandy and about a pound of baked sweet apples cut into pieces. Serve the punch very hot, keeping it over a spirit lamp to prevent its cooling. It may be sweetened to taste by adding more or less syrup, made by boiling sugar and water together, as for preserving syrup. Sweet dreams.